Hey, Erynn. What's your favorite idea?
Mine is being creative.
Mine's Gentlemen Prefer Cinephiles. It's a podcast about movies starring me, Charlie Moore.
And me, Erynn. Now, to quickly just jump in, if you're watching this episode, or if you're listening to this episode...
If you're tuning into this episode...
And you're just like, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared isn't a film. It is. And here's why.
Well, what is film, Erynn?
Okay, why do you think that Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared qualifies as cinema, Charlie?
Well, anything that uses cinematic language, I believe, is inherently filmic. Even short films and stuff like Twin Peaks: The Return, they're very cinematic in a way, and they tell a complete story.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Party time! Ow!
Could have said that better myself.
So why do you think it's cinema?
I just think it's kind of like watching a cinematic TV show, like something like
Twin Peaks: The Return.
No, not Twin Peaks: The Return. Even further than that. What's the new show on Westworld? Something like Westworld on HBO, or like
Westworld's so good.
Why am I blanking? Or like Game of Thrones. In a way, they're cinematic TV shows, and I think that they're filmic. Also, they're self-described short films.
Yeah.
Like, the first Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is explicitly a short film. It premiered at a film festival before it was on YouTube.
I don't know. I think that pretty much anything that involves editing...
Cinematic techniques.
Visual sound.
I don't know. I think some TV shows are TV shows.
Yeah.
And they incorporate editing and sound. But I do think Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared extends it further and uses film techniques to tell a story. And that's why it's more film than it is a TV show. Or like a little silly YouTube series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is a YouTube series that was started all the way back in like 2013.
Yes.
And has continued to go until its latest episode, which debuted in 2016.
Yes.
And it's a very beautiful series. We're both huge fans.
Mm-hmm.
My boy Kieran introduced me to it. It's a very good series. Erynn already knew about it.
It subverts a lot of things too. It's really interesting. So let's just go ahead and go part by part and discuss. So part 1.
Episode 1 of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is called...
Let's get creative?
Get Creative.
Get creative, something like that.
It's about a notepad that teaches the 3 main characters, Red Guy, Yellow Guy, and Duck, how to get creative.
And it sets up what the rest of the episodes do. So it sets up this 2-toned episode where the first part is presenting something to an audience that seems a little off-putting. Like, it's kind of like Funny Games in a weird way, because it's coded to be a certain way. Like, it's coded to be a kid's show, and your thought for most of the first half is, well, this isn't weird. Like, this is supposed to be a kid's show. There can't be anything weird about it. Like, it's saying some awkward things, but I'm pretty sure it's okay. You know what I mean? And then suddenly everything shifts and it turns into kind of like this body horror phenomena. It's a lot.
You see, I would describe the first half as being a very satirical jab at how kid shows
operate.
operate.
That's a good look.
You know, like all the jokes land where it's like the notepad seems to be singling out Yellow Guy as, you know, Yellow Guy is like, here's a painting I did, and black tar falls on it. Yellow Guy's like, my favorite color is green, and the notepad's like, green is not a creative color. And the joke stems from the fact that this teacher is being a dishonest teacher by only putting down one of the 3 main characters.
Yeah, or like taking something like creativity that's really open and trying to force a definition onto it, which is really, really interesting. And to go into it, it also establishes the 3 main characters. The notepad is not one of them. So one of them is a red guy. He's just like a red Muppet creature person.
He's pretty much got like a mop head.
Yeah, and he's like a mop head on a human body.
Full person in a red bodysuit with the spaghetti head look on top.
The second guy is Yellow Guy, as we said before. He kind of looks like a little kid.
He looks a lot like your regular Muppet look, where he's got like a big oval-shaped orange nose, kind of like Bert from Sesame Street. Yellow skin, overalls.
The third guy is green, but we're just gonna call him the duck because he's a duck.
Yeah.
He's straight up duck.
He's a duck.
Yeah, he's a duck. And I think it's really interesting because they almost all three of them almost represent certain demographics too. Like the yellow guy is is coded very childlike. The red guy is super like middle of the line, and then the duck is characterized as an old man.
That's true.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I'm an old man.
Yeah, and in addition to that, you have sort of like the childlike innocence of the yellow guy kind of shows itself as this pure innocence, kind of id-like. The duck is always kind of this middle ground kind of character who sometimes has these sort of downer notes. He seems very ego to me. And then red guy is just a very neutral, upstanding, constantly observing the absurdity of the world, super ego, if you will.
Yes, and they all go on really interesting arcs episode by episode. Ding! So the first episode, it pretty much just it introduces the kind of commentary on all the horrors.
Yeah.
But in the context of creativity being a forced definition.
And in addition to that, along with all the body horror and everything, there is a very meta element where the CGI segment in the bit where it like kind of swoops around and you see the camera and everything. It touches on all the different kind of little themes and deviations that the other episodes go on, but in one bite-sized first episode, it just kind of touches on all these themes of like the horror and the absurdity, the forcing of definitions, the critique of children's shows, but also the meta element where their reality is completely unreal, and that's on purpose.
Mm-hmm. So what is the second episode about?
Second episode's about time.
Yes.
Time is a tool you can put on the wall or wear it on your wrist. So, in this one, I think is where it starts to get really interesting, because it starts out where they're waiting to watch a show, and then the clock comes out to tell them about time. Mm-hmm. And the whole episode goes about with, it goes into those weird, awkward deviations where it starts to get horrific sometimes and comes back. But the part to me that I always found the most interesting is the end where they start questioning the moments of time, where they're like, when does it start and when does it stop? Is time even real? Does anyone know? And like the clock's trying to derail them and be like, he says this line where he's like, time is important, and I am a clock. Like, he's trying to wrap it up, but they keep asking questions, so then he...
Yeah, and wait, really quick, in the context of the children's show, that's a really interesting commentary, because it's kind of reminiscent of how children's questions about things that are completely valid are pushed aside simply because society has a way you should look at things. And putting that in the context of a show that's making commentary on how we teach children through media, it's really interesting.
Yes, but then after the clock yells at them and tries to wrap everything up, they all start growing super old and start falling apart and dying. And I find this part really interesting because as they start to decay and it gets really scary and gory, like it starts zooming out from the TV that they were watching the show from. And you see the duck's eye pop out of his head as it zooms away from the TV, like on the screen. And then the screen goes back to static and zooms all the way out, so then it was them watching the show. But then on the ground by the duck, the eye is still on the ground, which to me signals to that all that stuff with them dying actually happened to them, and it's a part of this bubbling reality that they find themselves a part of in this kids show. Mm-hmm. So that's just the most interesting part of it to me. How about you?
No, yeah, that's not the most interesting part to me. I already, like, that piece I said about the children's questions being viewed as stupid or that they don't understand when they're actually valid questions is really interesting to me, and that's the part that sticks out to me the most with this.
It's just that, there's this predetermined doctrine about the message where it's like there is, like, we don't know what the future's going to be, and time is just useful for looking back in the past and then measuring time in that way. And then once they start getting more abstract with it and asking if time is just a construct of human perception, like that's when it goes too far, because that's when you start, going off into more abstract ideas about whether or not there are any concepts in society or science that can't be abstracted in that way.
Yes, 100%. So the third episode 3.
Now it starts ramping up. This episode is so incredible.
Oh yeah, it's really interesting because this one's a straight up. It's like it's part religion. It's mainly religion.
Well, it disguises itself as being about love, but then by the end it turns out to be a huge critique of organized religion.
Which is really interesting. So it begins with they're all having a picnic. They're all friends. They're all having a picnic. It's cute.
Raw
it's adorable
chicken.
with raw chicken. It's
pretty gross.
So then the yellow guy gets upset when the duck kills a little butterfly, and then he runs off.
Bee.
And then he runs off, and then he's crying, and then this other butterfly comes to talk to him, and it's hilarious how he approaches him, because we live in an area that's full of a lot of religious people who like approach you on the street and ask you if you want to come study the Bible and things like that. And the segue the butterfly does is so accurate. It's just like, don't you just hate how there's so much hatred in the world? Do you mind if I ask you a question? And it's like, what?
Yeah, but it just starts off as this innocent, like, oh, don't you want to love? Don't you want to know about love?
Yeah,
And the yellow guy's like, I don't know anything about love. And the butterfly takes him on a magical ride to a magical land where love is a place. There's all these friends of her. There's like a bunny and a little furry boy and a purple guy and a tree. And they all sing and dance, and they tell the story of Michael, the ugliest boy in town. And they say everyone's got a special one, and we all love each other because we're friends and all this stuff. But then at the end, it says that they're like, love is between a man and a woman. There's special ones. That's the way it's always been. And then they start going into like these specific terminology, like,
Yeah.
it's perfect, and it's pure, and it's protected with a ring. And they just kind of like go into this spiral about it. And then they show, this is Malcolm. He's our king.
Yeah.
We feed him gravel. And it kind of goes about looking at like some of the more traditional aspects of religion, where there's these sort of methods about worship that are kind of like very specific but don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense.
Well, and I know when I always, as a child, engaged like religious figures in my life with the questions of, why are we doing this? Like, what's the point of this? Why didn't Moses get to go to the promised land because he hit the rock instead of talking to her? That's dumb. It was just kind of like, well, that's how it is. That's how it's always been. So I think it's really interesting to take the character that's most childlike once again and to kind of show how much we project these ideals onto children.
Yeah. And
I mean, it takes an extreme viewpoint to show you that, but it's really effective in showing you that.
it also kind of shows you the way that those kinds of moralistic things can be put into children's programming, where they don't necessarily have anything to do with learning, but it's like a more of like a moral thing.
Yeah.
And then by the end, he wakes up, it was a nightmare, and his friends come, and they're like, we love you, and you're like, oh, good, this is the platonic kind of love that's safe and not into this weird area where they're like, you have to change your name and brainwash you, like they literally say that in the show.
Yeah.
And then they bring him an egg, but then the egg hatches as like the offspring of him and the butterfly, and then the duck kills it, and then the episode ends.
And so there's that.
It's a pretty horrific ending. There's a lot of horror in this series, obviously.
Oh yeah. So now episode 4.
Ooh. This one is also really good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
It's really good.
It's pretty good.
It's amazing.
It's pretty good.
It begins with one of the better jokes in the show where they're wondering about what the biggest thing in the world is, and then this globe kind of turns around and is all like, dun-dun-dun. Like it's definitely leading you to believe that the globe will be the extra character this time.
Well, and this is where the commentary of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared kind of takes a separate turn in addition to the commentating on children's shows as well. It's really interesting because the red guy throughout all of these roles has kind of taken, like, it's clear that he's understanding of the shows in a way that's different. That seems like he's more in development of the episodes.
He's always been skeptical. Like when time
No.
shows...
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. He seems like the creative mind behind the show. It seems like he's the one who kind of wants things to go this way. And this is how, when the computer episode is really important, because I mean, he's kind of he's led the episodes for the most part. And at this point, he's gesturing towards this globe. He's leading up towards the globe to talk about the globe. The yellow guy and the bird follow, but then the computer just jumps in, and he's upset because he's like, what do we already have a laptop, like we're not talking about the laptop right now. And then he keeps getting upset because things are getting changed, and it's really interesting.
See, I don't read it that way at all.
Oh man, I read it that way a lot. Because I kind of read, I think Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared takes this turn where it not only shows you the element of us projecting ideas onto children and molding children to be a certain way, but also kind of showing how much creative control you lose in the process, or how you can kind of lose control over the things that you create.
You see, because to me, like, the red guy's always been the skeptical one of the group. Because when Time comes out and it's like, hey, there's lots of things to learn about Time. He looks at the camera and says, who is this? Like, he's obviously put off by the interactions that he has with, like, these, like, sort of teacher characters in the show.
Well, I don't read him as a skeptic. I read him as confused because things were... confused because I see it as being implied that he was told the episode would go a different way, and it just is derailed during the shooting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get that at all from it, and they don't...
And that's why Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is so good, because you can have so many different opinions on it.
Yeah, so anyway, they interact with the computer, and it's asking them all these absurd questions about themselves, and it's like, you know, it's being really in your face about it, trying to teach them about computers. This one's about computers now, and like, they enter this digital world, but not before there's a lot more, like, body horror where they're screaming, and there's a lot of confusing glitch animations while they're being transported there.
Mm-hmm. You right. And then the episode kind of just concludes with the yellow guy and the duck are just enamored by this computer world and taken over by it, and then the red guy separates himself and he follows this cord to another room where there are people filming the first episode in a low budget way, and then his mind explodes. I read this even more in line of him being like the creative center and not being able to, I guess, have control over his work, just because I think the reason his head explodes is because he realizes that he can do all this stuff without having to push these certain narratives and do things a certain way because he has to.
Yeah, I read it like, so a lot of the imagery in the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared series has a lot of bubbling realities where your characters wake up out of things and they interact with this false child show world in a way where they can separate out into different realities. So like in the first episode, they have the zoom around shot where you see the camera filming them for a split second, and then it goes back to them being giant size now.
Yes.
In the fourth episode, there's this part where it's being very repetitive with use of the computer, and they talk a lot about how inside this digital world, you're a digital you, and outside of it, you're the real you, and there's like this separation between the digital world and the real world in the text of the children's show. And once it starts zooming in on shots of Red Guy where he's realizing that, like, it's not that, like, the world that they live in is sort of like the digital world where it's not real. It's just a thing that they're in that seems like it's real, because when they're in the computer world it seems real. So once it like zooms out from that, he's separated from the computer and he follows the computer cord into this other room, where it shows like this very stripped down reality of the show, where they're all represented by like mops and stuff like that being recorded, and in my opinion, his head explodes because he realizes that they're not real.
I see.
Yeah.
I think you could also read it that way. So then, 5th episode.
Scariest episode.
It's my favorite episode. This one takes an approach about eating healthy and food.
Yeah.
And it just, once again, it's pushing that certain area. But it's getting hyper. This time it gets. So there's a slab of meat and like a can of food that are saying that you shouldn't eat things like cooked meats and like fruit salad and like soil foods, because you should eat white sauce and aspic and like all these crazy things. But then as the episode goes on and on, it starts to contradict itself and like say things at odds with each other. So it says like, you should eat plain white sauce, and then it's like, oh, don't eat plain white sauce, and then it's like, eat plain white sauce again. And it's a lot. It's very awkward, but it's intercut with this the most traditional horror element I think of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared that it uses. You should explain that.
Well,
with the duck.
Well, the duck has these sort of Lynchian moments where this red phone rings, and it's like the red guy trying to contact the duck inside this world, and it's like sort of like a snapback to reality type thing. So like when he picks up the phone and puts his ear to it, he wakes up in like this weird halfway house reality in this like hospital room, and he can see the TV screen in there playing the show, but then he's also in this hospital bed, and it cuts back and forth between that a few times. But the ending of the show is that they trick Yellow Guy to eat the duck by tricking the yellow guy into thinking that that's the good food for him. Like they put the duck into like a can in the microwave, and the duck wakes up in this hospital bed reality, and he sees like this giant can yellow guy hybrid just eating his guts, and it's really quite like viscerally disgusting because the guts look really realistic, and it's very horrific in that way. Very
gross.
Yeah.
It's pretty nasty. And then the episode just ends with red guy walking away from a telephone.
Yeah, the yellow guy is completely stuffed, and there's like green feathers everywhere, and you're like, oh my god, he ate him, and he's all full of the duck. And then the phone rings again, and the yellow guy just sits there confused, and then the red guy walks away from that telephone booth, and the episode ends like that. It's really weird.
Yes. In the 6th episode, so this is the 6th and final episode. Now, this is the full reason why I think that the red guy is like the creative control center of the whole show. Now, I'm going to say my interpretation of the scene, and then Charlie's going to say his, because I think it's going to be vastly different. So the episode starts with Yellow Guy like upset because he's the only one left and sad, and his friends are gone. And then one of the lamps comes alive and starts talking, is like, it's pretty much like the same episode setup, but this time it's the lamp trying to tell him about dreams. But the yellow guy's just over it and doesn't want to talk about it anymore. And then there's kind of this hard cut to the red guy. And I view it as a flashback where the red guy is in this... He's in this office setting, and he's doing paperwork, and he's just like... Wouldn't it be funny if this file was singing, haha, like, I'm a file, and you put documents in me? And everyone around him is very negative towards his ideas. Yeah. And so, after this, he goes to an open mic night with all of the people who have been really negative towards his ideas. And then he performs the first episode just on his own on stage. And then everybody's booing him except for one guy in the back. Which I think is kind of a lead into he decided to use Red Guy to create a children's show. But that's my read in on it. And then it gets to this place where Red Guy is in this room with a giant kind of master control board, and he's able to control what's happening to the yellow guy, what characters are put into like the setting yellow guy is in, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then the creepy guy who was watching him at open mic night puts his hand on his shoulder, and then he pulls the plug on the show. The show then goes to kind of a lower budget looking version of the creativity episode, but they're all their favorite colors, and then the episode starts again. So I kind of view that as like a new beginning where he realizes that he doesn't need to go a traditional route of telling his story, and now I view it as a positive ending.
I also view it as a positive ending.
Yes. So Charlie, what's your interpretation of it?
So the dreams, again, it's described as like a movie you can see in your head. So that's another sort of like the bubbling realities part. But then it just ends with Yellow Guy being tortured in his dreams because, well, throughout the course of the show, this character Roy shows up. He's Yellow Guy's dad.
He's the one watching him at open mic night.
He looks like Yellow Guy but grown up, but with like stringy hair. And he's pretty gross looking. He's pretty scary looking, but his name shows up a lot on the show, Roy, and he shows up in the background of a lot of episodes. So he's clearly like the one who's manipulating this reality to be the way that it is, where everything's wrong and he's trying to teach these lessons. It seems like Roy is without a doubt in control of the thing, from like,
a producer, if you will. Just kidding. Sorry.
from like the third episode onward, it seems that he is just, he's like, he shows up and he's in control. The second episode onward. But then Red Guy wakes up in an office that he works at, and this sort of represents a more real world. It's abstract and surreal. Everybody is a red guy but in a suit, and they all work in this office, and it's kind of sad and deflating. And every time that Red Guy tries to be creative like he learned in the first show, it doesn't really work out. And then he goes to this open mic night, like you said, and he tries to get creative because he's trying to get back to that place where, the reality felt fun and was like where he was with his friends, because obviously he misses them and they miss him, except for Duck, who is dead at this point. But he sees Roy off into the distance, and then he gets transported back into this sub-reality where the control screen, the control computer is, and he can see Yellow Guy being tortured by this teacher character, and he pushes the buttons, and you can see that it like takes the different past teachers show up, and then like new ones that show up that are crappy show up and are still torturing Yellow Guy, and then from behind him, Roy comes up and touches him on the shoulder. To which Red Guy notices that there's a big master plug, and he walks over there and he unplugs it, which, like you said, restarts everything into a more simple reality where they are their favorite colors, and it starts again with the notebook opening up and saying, "What's your favorite idea?" And then the show ends. And to me, it's more like it feels like everything's gone too far with the children's show, and it feels like Roy doesn't want it to go on anymore because everyone's unhappy and there's too much control that's been going on, and it feels like, to me, Red Guy just wants to live in that reality with his friends where they can be happy, where they're their favorite colors. And I think, to me, that's what the ending represents to me, even though Get Creative starts again, so I don't know if that's like a hint at the darkness or whether or not it'll go back that way again, but I agree that it's good that they're their favorite colors now. I just see it more in my bubbling realities theory.
That's really interesting that you view it so in terms of... You view it really, like, philosophically. I kind of view it in terms like rooted in reality in a way. So that's really interesting that we've come up with such vastly different explanations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really good. Have you guys seen Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared? The whole thing is about a half hour straight through. It's real good.
Yeah.
It's real good. So Charlie, do you have any other last thoughts about it?
I'm just a big fan. I hope I can create something that's as good as Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared someday. I really like it a lot.
I think you can, yeah.
And I like you a lot.
Oh my gosh. He's talking about you, audience.
Oh, and also you, audience.
We like you a lot.
The places that you can reach us at are
Gentlemen for Cinephiles, Facebook.
the YouTube page of the same name.
The iTunes podcast page, the same name.
Instagram of the same name, Gentlemen for Cinephiles.
And our website, gentlemenforcinephiles.net. Yes.
Wow.
Slay.
God, I love you so much.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so what do you guys think about Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared? Let us know in the comments down below. Goodbye.
That sounds really boring.
When you make t-shirts, please make one that says